Hey guys, welcome back to your channel. In this episode, I'm going to again talk about the commonality between quantum physics and spirituality. In the last few episodes, I talked what's common in quantum physics and spirituality, which were consciousness and vibrations. In this episode, I'm going to talk about dimensions. In spirituality, people often talk about going to higher dimensions, such as the Earth is in the process of ascension, going from a three-dimensional world to the fifth-dimensional world, which is accelerating since March 2020 or something like that. And also, we as a human being can also move from this three-dimensional world to higher dimensional world, and once you can go to a higher dimensional world, you can connect to your higher self. Then you will find out your true self, and you will be awakened. And in quantum physics, it also argues that 10-dimensional world or 11th dimensional world has to exist in order for them to support the superstring theory. Superstring theory is the theory that argues that everything after all is just a vibration of this one string. And we know that there are 17 elementary particles, but those 17 different particles after all are just created by the different way of vibration of this string. It could be, for instance, imagine a violin. The musical instrument violin has just a few strings, but it can play very different tones and play different sounds and music. Just like you can play violin in a very different way. The way this one string vibrates can create different results of the particles. That's the superstring theory, and to support this theory, there has to be 10 or 11 dimensional world. And physicists argue that we are living in a three-dimensional world, and so where are those rest of the dimensions? And they argue that the rest of the dimensions are folded in our three-dimensional world. So both spirituality and quantum physics talks about higher dimensions, which is interesting to me. And one more thing they are talking about is that the notion of parallel world. In spirituality, they often also talks about there are parallel worlds, and we are every day going from one parallel world to another parallel world. For instance, when you think, what I want to eat for dinner, and when you are just thinking, there are many possibilities, meaning there are many parallel worlds lying ahead of you. For instance, you eating sandwiches, parallel world, you eating hamburgers, parallel world, and you eating sushi, parallel world. And the moment you're conscious and you pick one with your intention, then you can jump to a particular parallel world. For instance, if you pick you eating sushi world, and then you can jump to the eating sushi world. That's how the spiritual people interpret the parallel world is like. And surprisingly, in quantum physics, there's also an interpretation called many worlds interpretation, which was first argued by American physicists Hugh Everett back in 1957. And many worlds interpretation is an interpretation of quantum mechanics that asserts that the universal wave function is objectively real and that there is no wave function collapse. What that means is that, as I talked in the previous episode, the moment we observe something, the wave function collapse occurs. Before we observe, there are the state is just like waves. Waves represents many possibilities, such as the Schrödinger's cat, alive and dead at the same time. But the moment you observe something, the wave function will collapse, meaning the cat will be either dead or alive. You can only observe one state out of many possibilities. And this many worlds interpretation argues that this wave function collapse actually doesn't exist, and it argues that all possible outcomes of quantum measurements are physically realized in some world or universe. Meaning, actually there are multiple worlds that's existing at the same time. And it sounds crazy when you think of your current real world. You cannot really go from one world to another easily unless you have a teleportation technology. But I interpreted this idea as a computer game. When you think of a computer game, and in the game when you're playing, you often have to make choices whether you're going to whether you pick option A or option B. And depending on which one you pick, you can go to a different phase of the game. But that doesn't mean that the option B side of the game ceases to exist. The game always exists there. If you play next time and you choose option B, you can go to the option B phase of the game, but option A of the game will still exist. So if you interpret this world like a computer game, it will be easier for you to understand this notion of parallel world or many worlds. And as I talked in my last episodes, there are scholars in the UK or anywhere else who are seriously studying if our current universe is a computer simulation or not. They argue that if we can create a computer simulation which is just like a virtual reality, we can create something very close to our reality, then why not our current universe is also a computer simulation, is also a virtual reality, and we are just like a character in a computer game, living in this game, thinking this is real, but maybe this is not real. I would love to hear from everyone. What do you think of this parallel world or many worlds interpretations? Does it scare you, or do you feel excited about this interpretation? Even in quantum physics, people said one day they may be able to create this quantum teleportation system using the quantum entanglement. So one day we might be able to just travel from one place to another in a moment of instance using the quantum mechanism. And this can maybe they can realize a real parallel world using this. But for the moment, I think the parallel world already exists, and we are just choosing which world we want to go. And in that sense, you can actually select which world you want to go. Every option, every choice is up to you. Just like I discussed in my first few episodes, we are the creator of our own reality. We select and create which reality we want to see, we want to go every day. So even though you face something bad in your life, after all, that's the outcome of your own choice, and you are willingly experiencing that version of the world. So in this episode I talked about the higher dimensions, 10th, 11th dimensions, both discussed in spirituality and quantum physics. I also talked about the parallel world or many worlds interpretations, which could be just like a computer game, and you are just playing the computer game and you have many options and you can see which options you pick, but the other option still exists. So that's it. From the next episode on, I'm gonna talk about something like the notion of oneness or the meaning of life. Alright, bye bye.